Oh, yeah. Good evening. I'm going to call tonight's school board meeting of Independent School District 191, Burnsville, Egan, Savage to order. It's August 9th. The time is 6:30 p.m. Welcome, and I'd like to ask Dr. Vandermoon to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We will move right into approval of our agenda for tonight. Could I take a motion? Moved by Director Schatz.
Second.
Second by Director Abigail. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Next, we'll move into the information session. First up, we have our academic intervention report. Our presenters tonight will be Dr. Jenna Mitchler, Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Assessment and Support Services, that's quite the title, and Director Janet Golden, MTSS, which is Targeted Service and Title I Coordinator. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Schmidt, Board of Directors, Superintendent Amoroso. I'm here tonight with Janet Golden, who will be presenting our report on academic interventions in 191.
Good evening. Tonight I am going to give you an update on two academic intervention programs, Math 180 and Read 180, that we have in place at the middle school and at the high school. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about what an academic intervention consists of. An academic intervention is intended to fill skill gaps and help students improve in an identified area of academic need. It offers intensive and focused instruction in those identified gaps. It provides strategies used to teach new skills, build fluency in skills, or enable students to apply existing skills to new learning. And for the most part, it is an addition to core curriculum. And the goal of interventions is to have accelerated learning for all students. And this is important because while we always want students to grow, at least have 1 year growth in 1 year's time, kids who are in academic interventions are already significantly behind. And so we want them to have accelerated growth. We want them to grow more than 1 year in 1 year's time. So the academic interventions that I'm going to talk to you about tonight are Read 180 and Math 180. They are in place in grades 6 through 9. They were first implemented in the 2016-17 school year in grades 6, 7, and 8. And then last year we added grade 9 at the high school. They are research-based and nationally used interventions, and both Read 180 and Math 180 have a similar lesson structure. There's whole group instruction, there's small group instruction, and then there's individual student software use that is individualized and adaptive, so kids are able to work at their own pace and at their own level. They are aligned, for the most part, to state standards, and we have about 300 students in Read 180, and we have about 500 students in Math 180. There is a criteria that is used to select students for intervention. We use multiple data points. The NWEA map, we look at kids who have scores below the 33rd percentile in reading and or math. We look at MCA scores for students who fall into the does not meet or partially meets category on the MCA. And student progress is tracked through multiple measures. And the reading inventory and the math inventory data, that's the data that we most closely track, and that's the data that I am going to share with you tonight. The reading inventory and math inventory are generalized academic tests, tests of academic skills. This is an overview of the content for Math 180. Math 180 content focuses on skills students need to be successful in algebra, and like all math coursework, it is highly sequenced where one skill builds on the other. And often what we find for students who are struggling in math, often they have missed some really core basic concepts in math along the way, and so they're not able to progress through math and master other concepts because they're lacking the foundational understanding. So an example of that might be If students don't understand fractions, they don't understand how they work, they don't know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, then they're not able to do decimals. And if they don't understand decimals, they can't do positive and negative numbers, and they just can't progress through the math coursework. So in interventions, if we can identify where those skill gaps are and then go in and fill those gaps in for students, then often that gives them the ability to access the content that is in their general education math class. Course 1 is a 2-year course. We had that in place. That's the top part of your screen. We had that in place in grades 6, 7, and 8. And then Course 2, which is the bottom part of the screen, that was in place in grade 9. Starting in 18-19 in the fall, we now will have 6th and 7th grade students in Course 1 and 8th and 9th grade students in Course 2. This slide shows progress, student progress in Math 180 is measured, and it is measured in what are called quantiles, and that is the unit of measurement that is used on the math inventory. It would be similar to how NWEA MAP uses RIT scores to measure student progress. The math inventory uses quantiles to measure student progress. This shows the initial score, which would be the gray bar. For most kids, that would be a math inventory score from September. And then it shows their final score, which would be the gold bar, which would be the math inventory that was given at the end of May. And this just breaks down the progress by grade level and shows the gains that students make by grade level. This next graphic gives you that same information, but it looks at it in a little different way. This shows growth for Course 1 students, which in 17-18 would have been students in grades 6, 7, and 8. And as you look at those bars, what we want to see is movement to the right. So we want to see the gray, which would be the fall measure, decreasing, and we want to see the blue increasing, and that's exactly what this shows. And you can see how there's a bell curve, and that bell curve is moving to the right. This shows that 52% of students showed significant growth of at least 200 quantiles. And that's significant because remember earlier I talked about how we want students to have accelerated growth, and 100 quantile growth is approximately 1 year of growth, and we had over half of our students who showed 2 years of growth based on the math inventory data. The other thing I just want to point out is on the very left where it says EM to 199 quantiles. EM just means emerging mathematician, and that's just kind of the lower or the kind of the base score. I'm going to show you the same information. This is for Course 2 students. This would have been 9th graders in 17-18. And again, it's the same thing where we want to see movement to the right, and we want to see that bell curve moving to the right. This shows that 56% of students in Course 2 showed significant growth of at least 200 quantiles. Again, showing that accelerated growth that we're looking for our intervention students. Moving on to Read 180. Reading instruction is not quite as linear as math instruction. So Read 180 is primarily works on comprehension skills, building comprehension skills for students, helping them to become proficient readers. It teaches things like how to navigate structures of text, how to read a nonfiction text, which is very different from trying to read a fiction text. Focuses a lot on comprehension skills such as central idea, summarizing, inferring, theme, applying and transferring across texts. There's work on academic vocabulary, on writing, and on fluency. This shows growth metrics on the reading inventory, and again, that is given, like the math inventory, it's given 3 times a year, September, January, and May for the most part. And progress on the reading inventory is measured by Lexile growth. And Lexile measures a student's reading ability and also the relative difficulty of a text. And Lexiles are very commonly used measurements in reading programs and in reading assessments. And again, we're looking for growth for students. And if you look at the first bar there, it shows that according to the reading inventory, we had 78% of our students gain in Lexile. 59% met their end-of-the-year growth goal, and of that 59%, 38% met the 2 times growth goal, that accelerated growth that we are looking for. The fourth bar where it talks about improved CCR performance, that means college and career readiness, and I'll address that in the next slide. And then that last bar, that blue bar, within the Read 180 software, it is adaptive software, and so as students progress through that, the level of difficulty will increase or decrease based on how students have performed previously in the software, and that's just a metric that shows advancement of levels within that software. This shows the same information about the reading inventory. Again, this is broken down into those 4 college and career readiness categories, and those are categories that another category of measurement that the reading inventory uses. So we have below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. And again, we want to see movement to the right. We want to see the blue dropping and the red increasing. And each of these bands represent a 200-point Lexile range or a 200-point Lexile gain. Ultimately, our goal is to get students to proficiency, and typically once they reach that proficiency mark on the reading inventory, then we look at exiting them from Read 180. So overall, we're very pleased with the progress that students are showing. Our goal, of course, is to have accelerated growth for all of our students who are in reading intervention or math intervention programs.
Well, thank you for that presentation. That was very informative. Any questions from the board? Director Alt.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. One question going back to the intervention criteria. Can you speak to how we address our English language learners to make sure that, for instance, we're not giving someone an intervention simply because they don't speak English as a native?
Sure. All of the EL students, all students are looked at in terms of looking at their MAP scores and their MCA scores. And so EL students would be included in that pool of students that we look at. Typically for EL students, if they're at the stage of where they're beginning to learn English, they're a level 1 or a level 2 student, we probably would not place them in Read 180 or Math 180 because they don't have enough English to be able to navigate those programs, and their needs would be met through EL service. If a student has scores that would indicate that they might benefit from an intervention, then we look at that. We do have many EL students who are in intervention, and if they would have scores that would show that they've mastered the concepts that are taught in the intervention and then they no longer need it, they would be exited regardless of their English proficiency. Although the two tend to go together, particularly for reading. If they're not proficient in English, they probably are in need of a reading intervention because they're still learning those skills and learning those concepts.
And one more question. So there's growth and there's accelerated growth that we're seeing, and that's terrific. Can you speak to, is the accelerated growth that we're seeing simply because of the addition of Read 180 and Math 180? I know there's a lot that we've been working on over the last couple of years. What are you seeing in the data that would inform that?
I think it's probably a combination of lots of things. Certainly, these interventions offer kids some academic support that they've not had previously, but we are also working very hard on our core curriculum and making sure that instruction is aligned to state standards and we're using best practice, and that our teachers are receiving a lot of support and coaching, and that we are giving kids the best possible instruction. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things that are happening that are really exciting.
Terrific.
That we have for students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other board members? Director Schatz.
Thank you. I had that same question, so thank you, Dr. Alt. I have two questions. One is first about the qualifications, using the MCA as a qualifier, and so that would discount students who have not taken it. So they need to be in the district for a year, or are we using data from other districts? So a student from 196 comes into this district, and we don't have their MCA scores, so they would need to take the MCA once before we would consider them for the program?
Well, sometimes we can find those scores in the records that come from other districts. So often we can find that information. We can also screen students using the math inventory or the reading inventory if we don't have other data. So that's another way that teachers might identify once school gets started as saying, wow, I think this is a student who might benefit from an intervention. So we have some other ways of trying to get a handle on that student's achievement and what their needs might be.
Okay, so we can address that sooner than later, rather than
Yeah.
waiting for that.
Right, we don't have to wait for those scores to come in. And then MAP scores, we get those right away because those are given early in September and we get the results immediately. So that usually is available pretty early in the year.
Okay, good, thank you. And then my second question is about the splitting the course 1 and course 2 grades. And then it's kind of the same question if course 1 is grades 6 and 7 going forward, and course 2 is 8 and 9. What do we do with students who come in at grade 8 and have come into the district in grade 8, or somewhere in that continuum where they have not had the support or that the coursework before that?
I think some of that can be addressed within Course 2 software, particularly at the beginning levels. There is a fair amount of review at the beginning of Course 2 software. We've not actually had that situation because Course 2 is going to be new in 8th grade. So I think we'd have to look at that. Might have to look at, would there be another type of math intervention that student might need that would be a better fit than Math 180 for them at that point?
Great, yeah, I mean, it certainly, even though the situation hasn't come up, it certainly is going to. I'd like us to have some idea of what how we'll handle that to best support the student. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Schatz. Any other board members? Director Miller.
First of all, thank you again for joining us. A couple of questions. The numbers of students involved that you put up there, and so these are 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Correct.
So predominantly middle schoolers. Can you give me a sense or feel how they are distributed throughout the district at all? We have 3 middle schools. Is it fairly even, or?
It is fairly evenly divided among the 3 middle schools. We have 3 sections of Math 180 in each grade level at the middle school. And at the high school, last year I believe there were 9 sections of Math 180, and I believe this year there are going to be 8 sections of Math 180. And that's just based on projected student numbers.
Okay. And there was mention, and we talked about the 33% MCA score. Once a student, so is it like the minute they go below 33, they're put into this program? And then you talk about like a 2-year, can they exit out of the program before the 2 years is over, or is it, please elaborate.
Sure. Students can exit at any time. And actually, we do have a fair number of students that exit at some point in the year based on a lot of reasons. Often it's because they're showing proficiency and they're showing that they really do understand and that this intervention is no longer a good fit for them. And in terms of using the 33rd percentile of NWEA and those MCA scores, that's sort of a way of creating sort of a beginning pool of potential students. And then from there, most of this work is done at the building level because they know their students. And so we sort of build an initial pool using that data, and then from there kind of drill down into it and try to determine which students really are in need of either or both of these intervention programs.
So the last thing for you, we have a pressing student performance issue in the district. Do you feel this program is adequately meeting the needs? Do we need more students involved in this? Are there enough students involved in the program to address the needs?
I think we've done a very good job of identifying students who benefit from this and who need this type of intervention. So I feel confident about the students that we've been able to pull into the program. I think we always need to be continuing to look at this and to review it and to make sure that it is meeting the needs of the students. That's the purpose of an intervention. And if it doesn't meet their needs and it's not the proper response to their needs, then obviously, yes, we need to look at other things.
Thank you. And I guess my point is, sometimes when we look at a program like this, we assume, well, that's the solution. And I want to make sure that we're not just catching the ones we can get in because that's the resources we have, and there are some that are going by the buy side because we don't have the resources to cover them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess more of a general statement to the rest of us, this is a student performance issue, and as a member of the Students' Performance Committee, I kind of would prefer this maybe it appeared at our subcommittee so we could maybe have delved into this a little bit deeper, because there's certainly more questions I have that I don't want to spend the time here tonight. So just for future reference, I think this would probably be an appropriate report for that level, and then maybe come forward to the board.
Thank you. Director Luth.
Thank you. I'm on slide 7,
Okay?
and it's the one that shows the grade 6, yeah. Okay. I want to make sure I'm understanding what this is portraying. So let me try to tell you what I think I'm seeing, and you tell me where I'm wrong or if I'm right.
Okay.
So let's just take the grade 6. We have 131 students in grade 6. They're in Math 180 students. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, and when I look at that group at the start of that period, that group collectively looks like it averaged at about halfway through grade 3 level, the 530, right?
Based on that one math inventory score. Yep.
Okay. And then at the end of a year, I'm assuming, but so the yellow gold bar, we showed them moving on average, that group of 131 students moved approximately half a year on this particular item. Am I reading? Because they went from middle 3rd grade to just a slightly over 4th grade level.
Well, what it's showing there is a gain of about 109 quantiles.
Okay.
So that would be about a year. Mm-hmm.
But the group is not showing, it's going from a level of halfway through grade 3 proficiency or whatever level, to a little bit over 4. So you're getting exactly my question, because the statement was saying that 100 is about a year's worth, yet when I'm looking at this isolated group, I'm only seeing about a half a year of growth. So that's where I'm confused on the quantile.
Okay,
what I'm
where
getting at? Yeah.
the
And in fact, none of those are actually showing 200. Mm-hmm. It's showing more like maybe a little above to even a little below what would be 100 quantile or a year's worth of growth, right? So it looks to me, it just seems to me when I'm looking at this example, I'm only seeing about, on average across all of them, about a year's worth of growth. So we're not really accelerating. I'm not seeing accelerated growth here, if I'm reading this right. So I'm just trying to understand.
Superintendent.
So I think that's where the two graphs work together, because this is showing you an average of a group. So you're not seeing in that average, you're not seeing those who achieved higher than the 200. You're also not seeing those who didn't.
I understand
hit the
that.
Yeah.
I understand that portion. It goes to a little bit of what was just said before, because this is now looking at, because this boils up to us, it's not on those little individual levels. We're looking at overall proficiency of the grade level and things like that. And that's where I understand that maybe half of these students actually did 2 years, but when you start to look at it as system-wide, we're really only, even with these students, are really only averaging a year's worth of growth, and we're putting a lot of time and energy into this in hopes. So yes, some of them are accelerating, but obviously a lot of them are not. Yes, it averages out maybe to something. It doesn't average out to much more than a year, I guess, is what I'm looking at here. And so I'm not trying to find fault here, but I don't want to be jumping up and down, because I understand when you get down to the detailed data, you can make some percentages that are doing 2 years of growth, but overall, it seems like it's only showing about a year's worth of growth.
Yeah, so I think to your point, Director Luth, and to yours as well, Director Miller, we know that we've seen some success with students with these Read 180 and Math 180 programs. We also know that we need to be improving, because our district values continuous improvement, our targeted service, our targeted instruction to students based on what their needs are. And so we just today actually had our first kickoff for Leadership Academy for the year, working with our site leaders and our CISA department leaders, and we're really excited to be strengthening our multi-tiered systems of support throughout the rest of this year and building on the interventions that we have in place. So I think you bring up a really good point, and I'm glad you did. And we're really excited about looking at other types of interventions we can put in place and continue to strengthen in the district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Vandenboom.
Thank you, and thank you. There's nothing more I like talking more about at board meetings, actually, than student performance, so I appreciate you bringing this before us. One of the questions I have, these quantiles, lexiles, and you're talking about with 33%, or a small group of our students, are we using those same metrics in the same language, if you will, for the rest of the students? Or is this strictly for this group of students that are in this program? So it's a language. I mean, quantiles and lexiles is like a language to talk about math and about reading. And so I'm just trying to understand that. So do 10% of our students, you know, is the teacher conversation about lexiles and then the rest, the 90%, it's about ABCs? What are we doing in terms of the languages? Is there consistent language across all of our math and all of our reading?
The quantile measurement is unique to the math inventory. The lexile measurement is commonly used in reading programs and in reading materials and in reading assessments. So that language of lexiles would be widely used, not as much the quantile measurement.
Okay, so,
and again, it's a unit of measurement.
Right, and even within our own schools, it's going to be a mix, right? So it's going to be a mix of quantiles and something else for the students that are not in the Math 180 program.
It would be probably for math, it would be RIT scores. I mean, students know what their RIT scores are on the map, on NWEA map. They typically know what their achievement level would be on the MCA,
Okay.
but the quantile measurement is just used in the math inventory.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comment? I actually had a few myself. You probably picked up on a few themes. You know, the board is always interested in student performance, student achievement. And the board is also always interested in how students either get in a program or get out of a program, because, you know, over the years we've had situations on different programs where different levels were drawn and students were either in or out, and, you know, we don't like those definitive. So I had a few questions around the 33%. First of all, I understand we have to pick a number somewhere. So 33%, let's say a large number of students fall into that. Do we have the program to support however many students fall into that category?
Right now, we have been able to place all of the students who we believe should be in a math intervention or a reading intervention at middle school and high school.
Double next year, so we get the scores. Do we have the bandwidth, or do we then all of a sudden have to say 20%?
I think we'd have to look at all the aspects of the student data on that. Right now, based on other data that we have, I don't anticipate that we would have that large number, that increase of that large number of students coming through who would need
Because
an
what we've seen as a
intervention.
board, not recently, but years past, the scales would move to fit the number of students who qualify for something into the resources we have. And that was unacceptable to the board.
Right, and I don't foresee that would happen with
Okay.
this. Yeah.
Along those lines, as we know, when students take a test, some may not try, some may opt out. And so you mentioned other means. How do we know we have all the right students in the program? So, you know, for instance, those who might not try but are actually quite qualified not to be in the program. Or on the flip side, those who may have opted out for whatever reason, their parents opted them out of the testing, how do we identify those students?
Well, to my knowledge, we haven't had any students opt out of taking
Okay.
the math inventory or the reading inventory. So I don't think that is an issue.
All right. Last one on this subject. What if a parent wants their child in, but they're at 40%? Or what if a teacher recommends a student be in? How do we handle those situations?
I think what we would look at is that individual progress of that student and the individual needs of that student. And another measurement that is used in determining if students are ready to exit the intervention is how are they doing in their general ed reading class or their math class. And so if they're performing well in that, then we wouldn't put them in, and we would exit them.
Okay. Moving on, this is another math thing similar to Director Luth. On slide 9, I was curious how we had 2 students in one category, but 3 moved out of it. So in the EM,
Oh, okay. I think that might have been a student who moved from another range backwards. Is where that third student came from.
So it may not be positive movement we're seeing, they could actually move backwards.
Sometimes that does happen. Often when that happens, particularly in May, we have students retake the math inventory or the reading inventory if the teacher feels that they haven't put the effort into it or that their performance on that inventory doesn't match with what the teacher is seeing.
Okay. Last question. On slide 3, you talked about the lesson structure, whole group, small group, individual. How is that determined?
Let me just go back and look at that. The lesson structure?
Yeah. So how do you determine if a student's in a whole, I don't know what a whole group means, or a small group or individual?
Oh, okay. That just basically is the structure of the daily lesson. They usually begin with some type of very brief sort of whole group. In math, it might be a math problem. In reading, it might be some type of comprehension exercise or some tie back to what had been taught previously. That's a very brief part of the daily lesson structure. Then they move into small group, where typically students are divided into 2 groups, and that small group meets with the teacher while the other group is working on software, and then they flip at a certain point in the period.
Actually, that's good to hear. So it's very consistent. It's not like
Right. It's laid out very structured in both of those programs, and our teachers do follow those structures.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That's great. Well, as you probably gathered, the board is very interested in this. We do appreciate it. And to Director Miller's point, I mean, this is such an important topic to us. We probably should have a deeper dive, because I am sure many of us would want to go further, into questions and stuff. So maybe the SPA committee might want to consider taking this, as a future item for their agenda as well. But thank you for your time and preparation.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, we're going to get a donations report. I believe this is our annual donations report. Presenting will be our Executive Director of Business Services, Lisa Ryder.
Good evening. To begin with, this is a report that is reflective of the donations that have been officially received by the school board during the fiscal year and school year of 2017-2018. So the year that has been wrapped up, that we are currently in the process of auditing. So within that year, 182 donations valuing more than $250,000 were received by the Board of Education. And there's a breadth of support from our community, and we're very fortunate to have a wide variety of partners, which is what makes us, the community, strong as we seek to be. So the PTOs, businesses, you can see the list of various different donors that we've had. Donors can designate, when they provide their donation, what their gift is to be used for, and here's just a sample of some of the things that people designate the gifts toward. In addition, we also receive a variety of in-kind donations that support students and programs within our district. So instead of cash, it might instead be these in-kind donations, such as, you can see the list, books, dictionaries, food and supplies, instruments, backpacks, hats, mittens. Just to talk a little bit about some of these in-kind donations, we have Walzer has been a tremendous partner for us this past year, helping us to provide a real-world technology and real-world learning opportunities for our students. This year, they donated $75,000 for equipment for the engine and automotive technologies pathway at our Burnsville High School. VistaView PTO donated more than $15,000 so the school could reopen and renovate the performance stage that had been covered. Now it provides a venue for students and staff to share their talents and is a great community space.
It looks like it's working.
Yeah. Once again, Kevin and Greta Warren showed their tremendous generosity and support for 191 students, and this was their second year of providing 5 graduating seniors with no doors closed scholarships worth $5,000 per year for 4 years. The Burnsville Rotary Clubs are ongoing and consistent supporters of our schools, and each year they provide scholarships for our seniors and numerous other supports. This year, the Burnsville Noon Rotary also provided $10,000 donation to Brain Power in a Backpack. We mentioned in-kind donations before, and as an example of one that we can highlight in particular, the Burnsville Seniors Center Knitting and Crochet Group. They made and donated 233 pairs of mittens, 324 hats, and 162 scarves, and a number of other winter items for students. We had 7,827 volunteer hours that were logged at the elementary schools during the 2017-2018 school year. And we know that there are many more volunteer hours that never got logged, that extend beyond that. So we just wanted to take an opportunity to thank our community for the generosity and to also make sure that everyone understands that every donation is appreciated. Should there be a desire to donate, they can contact us at this number and we can fill them in on how. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Lisa. And as you mentioned, the district is very grateful for all of our donations, whether it's monetary, in-kind, and like you said, the time is so crucial as well. And I suspect that number is grossly underrepresented, quite frankly. I'm sure it's much, much higher just with all the help we have in the schools. But thank you for that report. Any board member report or questions? Yeah, Director Miller.
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the community for that. 2 quick questions. So just to be clear, the in-kind is not included in that 250. You don't put any valuation.
So
That's in addition, right?
correct. That would be above and beyond.
And then you probably heard this from me before.
Mm-hmm.
When I see quantifiable numbers, context is awesome. So can I get a little feel for how our donations compare year over year?
Okay. I don't have that at the moment,
Okay, that's
but we
fine.
can
I mean, is
certainly
it-
look and give you
Is
some
it
kind of a.
growing, decreasing, staying about the same, roughly? I mean,
I would want to probably look at that more accurately before responding, but we can certainly get that to you and give you some
All right, thank
context.
you.
Thank you.
Director Vanden.
Yeah, just a quick comment, because, every board meeting, we do, on the consent agenda, we see them coming through, and we used to read every one of them out, and so, throughout the year, I see some just fantastic donations, large and small, and, it really is great throughout the year, and it's always a struggle for me as a board member not to want to call them out individually, so thank you for pulling this together, but I really want to thank, and I think everybody does, all the community members that do so many different things, to volunteer your time, money, in kind. It's just amazing when you actually see it, and it's hard to summarize when you see all those individual things as well, but it's just fabulous, so thank you all.
All right, yes. Thanks, thanks to the community for all their support, and thank you, Lisa, for pulling this together.
Sure.
All right, we will move on to our next information item. That'll be our superintendent report from Superintendent Amoroso.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt. Tonight, I want to talk about summer in our schools. I think there can be a perception that schools are just shut down over the summer and everyone takes 3 months off. While it's true that our schools are quieter, summer is still a very busy time for many of our staff and students. So here's a little bit about this summer's work, and I want to start out with staff members who probably don't get as much praise as they deserve. Approximately 1.7 million square feet of space in our schools will be cleaned by the end of this summer. Thanks to our amazing custodial and maintenance staff, our students and staff will come back to schools that are absolutely sparkling. In addition, parking lots at 6 schools, including here at Diamond Head, have been or are being repaired or completely resurfaced and reconstructed, and there are dozens of projects to improve our buildings, including new lighting, interior paint, window replacements, and much more. I'd like to thank Glenn Simon and his staff for all of their work. When it comes to technology, our staff members have or are replacing 220 wireless access points at 5 schools as part of a 5-year plan to replace them district-wide, replacing 51 copiers, and removed, allocated, or updated 221 printers, collecting 1,200 Chromebooks from 12th and 8th graders, and are preparing them to be used elsewhere in the district. Ordering and are preparing 2,300 Chromebooks and Chrome tablets for use by elementary students, and I'll just point out that this is the next roll-in of our Vision 191 bond referendum that we had in 2015. And they're updating safety and backup systems to protect critical resources. And they're doing all of this while taking care of typical annual maintenance and upgrades and providing support to our summer school programs. Speaking of summer school, we have a number of excellent summer programming options available for students this year. Between summer school and our Burnsville Youth Collaborative programming, we provided targeted education programming to about 550 students in grades 2 through 8. And I will mention that that does not include our Project Kids childcare program or any of our pre-K programming. I know that the board will be hearing more about that Burnsville Youth Collaborative programming at a future meeting. Our Food and Nutrition Services Department is also busy over the summer as we host several sites where children can receive free meals during part of the summer. Through just July 31st, our staff had already served 13,816 breakfasts and 23,915 lunches at 8 sites to our children. It's amazing and important work to keep our students fed and ready to succeed through the summer. Lastly, summer is one of the busiest times for our Human Resources Department. Staff there handled 121 position hirings for summer staff members, and 71 staff members have been hired for the upcoming school year, with more likely to be added. This seems like a lot of people, but it's actually about average for our new hires before each school year. I want to thank everyone who's been so busy this summer working to make our district great. We are future ready and community strong. And speaking of community strong, I'd just like to take an opportunity for a personal thank you to all of you who reached out to me in so many ways to show your support and sympathy since losing my mom 2 weeks ago. It means a great deal, and I appreciate it very much. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Cindy. As you know, the board didn't meet in July as well, but the board does remain quite active during the summer months as well, and so possibly there are some board member reports to call out. Or if not, that is fine. Director Alt.
So I'll save the report on the committee assignment for the next meeting. Even though we are just at the beginning of August, I can tell that things are ramping up in our schools. Staff are busy planning and organizing, and we are all looking forward to a fresh start with the new school year. It's good to be back. Despite the flurry of activity that I know is happening across 191, August started relatively slowly for me, so my report tonight is fairly short. As many of you know, Tuesday, August 7th was National Night Out, and as is our tradition, 191 representatives joined city staff in visiting community block parties. I would like to thank Director of Technology Doug Johnson and Director of Student Services Stephanie White for joining the festivities that evening. Detective Brent Murray and I had a lovely tour of Burnsville together, and we enjoyed answering the variety of questions that people had for us. Parents were very forthcoming and positive about their children's experiences in our schools. It was a beautiful night to be out and about in Burnsville, and I would like to thank the party organizers for inviting us to join them. I would also like to thank community members for their participation in making Tuesday night a success and for sharing their positivity and feedback about our schools and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Alt. Director Carrier.
I know that fellow board members and the audience are both coveting and admiring my new jewelry that I'm wearing tonight, but it's not jewelry. It is
although the rivets, aren't they just stunning? It's a brace, and I spent from June 29th until the present, I had surgery on June 29th for my back, so I'm in a brace, and it shows here. So, and I also have a walker over here, but I'm getting better and better every day not using the walker. I can't wait to get rid of it. But anyway, that's my new wardrobe piece, and I know it's just a, I feel a little bit like a teenager, with this new piece of jewelry. Anyway, that's what this is all about. And like Cindy said, I appreciate all the good wishes people have given me, and I appreciate it. The plant that the board sent me is the only thing that's still alive of all the things that came to my house. So thank you very much.
Well, we're glad to certainly see you back right at the first meeting of our
Yes.
new year, and so we appreciate that.
Yes,
Glad to see you're
thank
healing
you.
so well.
Yes.
Any other board member reports? Director Luth.
Yeah, I'm going to take this as an opportunity just to make a short statement. Though I've been quite forthright, I want to tonight formally announce that I will not be seeking re-election this year. I do encourage residents of 191 to consider running for the board. I especially would like to reach out to persons of color to consider a run for the board. As a district that is highly diversified, I believe we are well past due having a board that more closely reflects the demographics of the community. Please note, though, we're running out of time. The application period continues for just a few more days. I believe it's the 14th, is that correct? Which is next.
Yep, at 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you for that public service announcement. And thank you, Dan. Any other board member reports? Director Miller.
I'm going to tail on that and encourage folks to run as one of the junior members of this board. It is at first intimidating endeavor, but it's actually fairly easy to accomplish. So, and I'd like to point out, as I mentioned to a couple of my other representatives here, under the current filing situation, I will be the only candidate west of Nicollet Avenue. So I'd like to see a little bit more representation on our side of town. So please come out and give consideration to running. So.
Please don't think I'm abandoning you.
No, it's all right. I'm looking for representative voting rights. So no, I'm kidding. But please come out and vote. Give it consideration.
Thank you, Director Miller. Any other board member reports? All right, seeing none, next we'll move to our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Any items to be removed tonight? Seeing none, do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Director Vandenboom?
Second.
Second by Director Courier. All those in favor of the motion, or any discussion first? All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. We will move right into the business part of our meeting. First on the docket will be approving the activities handbook. Presenting tonight will be Guillaume Peck, our athletics and activities director. Guillaume?
Thank you, Chair Schmidt, directors, Superintendent Amoroso. I'm here to seek approval on the recommendation that the Board of Education approves the 2018-2019 Burnsville High School Athletic and Activity Handbook. It's essentially just updated information with the new plays, the new coaches. There's one little piece at the end of the eligibility where my plan is to sort of just assess the eligibility requirements that we have. And I haven't made a decision exactly on whether or not I'm going to propose some sort of modification or adjustment to that eligibility policy. So.
All right. Let's see, let me bring up the motion. I don't know if we have a motion. Based on that, yeah, all right. Bear with me 1 second. I was in the presentation. I want to read it formally, that's why. I'm almost there. The recommendation is the Board of Education approves the 2018-2019 Burnsville High School Athletic and Activity Handbook. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Director Ault, seconded by Director Luth. Any discussions or questions? Director Courier.
If someone wanted to donate, if a student couldn't pay the athletic fees, how would a public person donate to make that possible?
Are you talking for a specific student or just sort of in general?
In general?
They could contact the athletic office.
Okay.
Are you suggesting they put it in the book?
That might be a good idea.
Okay.
I know of people who are interested in doing that, and I know people in the past who have done that, but that might be a way to encourage people to donate.
Okay, I can amend the book, I think.
And if you can't, I mean, at least maybe put it in a newsletter.
Okay, fantastic, I can do that.
Director Vandenboom.
Okay, thank you. The first question is there a system in place to record participation in all these sports activities for next school year?
There is, we currently use FeePay, which allows me to generate the reports. I have to fill out a Minnesota Department of Education report every year to include those participation numbers.
Is that new then, Guillaume?
No, that's been going on, I believe that report's been required for a long time.
Well, the reason I ask is, obviously we talked about this, when we were talking about which sports to keep in, and we talked about participation and how many students were in the various programs, and we had a difficult time kind of coming up with how many students actually participate in each of the clubs and sports and so forth. So is that system just a fee-paying system, or is it going to actually keep track of how many students are in each of the various activities throughout the year?
So in particular with the athletic component, in order for students to be cleared to participate, because the sports physical is in there, participation fees in the actual registration language, the Minnesota State High School League eligibility brochure is transcripted into that. They're not allowed to, they shouldn't be allowed to participate. They shouldn't be participating unless they've completed that form.
There's a lot of clubs and so forth, there's skeet shooting, and there's a number of other clubs. Do we track student activity for all of the clubs or not?
That's a really good question. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I believe the trap shooting is sort of an associated organization, not necessarily, it's a school sponsored, but we don't actually run it through their self-sufficient program.
Okay. Well, and so I know this was a slight diversion, but I mean, it has to do with all these activities. That's why I brought it up. The second thing I wanted to ask about is I know there's like a code of responsibilities for students in the handbook. I'm curious if there's one for coaches and leaders of the various sports teams. And the reason I bring it up is that, there were 3-4 years back, we had a situation where a student opted to go to a national science fair as opposed to attending a particular sporting event. And there were sort of repercussions, if you will, just indirect repercussions, we'll call it. So I had a number of parents at that time that were pretty upset about it. And so something that talks about, and I don't know if it's here or maybe it's in something else that the students, and if maybe it's in the student handbook, but is there some place where it says here's what the coach and leader's responsibilities are as part of the process? I know you lead, your entry said, we're here to supplement, complement academics, but it wasn't always clear, I don't think, with all of the coaches and participating adults.
That's a really good question. To my knowledge, I don't know that I haven't seen any existing coaching manuals, but there's one of my goals this year is to try to create that coaching manual. I actually have a draft that I'm working off of that I previously worked on. So the plan is to try to have a coach's manual that has the logistical pieces as well as the expectation pieces in that.
Thank you. I would encourage you to do that, and I thought it was great. I mean, it's one of the, I know it wasn't formatted pretty, but it was actually, the content was fabulous. So thanks for all the hard work that went into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Alt?
Thank you, Guillaume. Appreciate you bringing this to us. In terms of the fees that are that families pay for participation, their students' participation in the clubs and activities, do you have any sense as to whether those fees cover the cost of participation? What the relationship is between the cost of participation versus what's paid?
You mean whether or not a program is self-sufficient or if they're a deficit?
And if during the school year, families need to supplement what they've paid?
That is also a very good question. I actually, there are a lot of programs that have booster clubs that ask for booster contributions, and there are lots of things that they do support. There are several teams that haven't requested uniform purchases for the last 6 or 7 years because the boosters have generated enough to be able to support the purchase of new uniforms. I know there are just a lot of expenses in some of these, athletics and activities. I believe with marching band, I know some marching bands actually have a semi-trailer that they use to transport goods. Our drum line has to rent a U-Haul van every weekend. They have a competition to move their stuff, and those are costs that the school district does not pay for because of the generous contributions by the families.
And I know in questions that I had asked you previously, you had also mentioned that families donate their time.
Yep, that is correct.
There's financial contribution and time.
Yep, there's a lot of folks who come and help support our programs and work concession stands and volunteer their time. There's a lot of sweat equity that's involved as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Director Schatz?
Hi, Guillaume.
Hi.
I have two questions. I'm just going to circle back quick to follow up with Director Vandenboom's question about tracking attendance for clubs and activities. And while trap shooting, certainly if that's an associated program, we maybe wouldn't do that. But something like our Stellar Quiz Bowl program, they do register through fee pay. And so for clubs and activities like that, are we tracking that kind of attendance as well?
Yep. So the participations are recorded. Anything that goes in fee pay. Are you talking like
Yep.
daily attendance?
No, tracking for participation.
Yep.
So anything that goes through fee pay, we're able to see how many students are in those programs and what how much participation we have in those programs.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, but we don't do that for programs outside that are not registered through fee pay, and it sounds like trap shooting is one of those. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. And then in addition to that, there is, so last year I believe was the first year. It was reported to me that last year was the first year that activities went through fee pay, and it was successful in some programs and a challenge to get students registered in other programs. And so there are a few activities that are going to go back to sort of a paper and pencil type registration, not that online, but the expectation of those advisors is that they keep track of the participation and registration.
Okay, and so, however you can get them registered. I mean, it would be nice to have those numbers, but then they report that information to you regardless of how it's collected.
Yep, that will be the expectation. Like I said, last year, we were relying on fee pay, but there were some activities that students didn't need to be registered through the high school league or didn't need to have a sports physical.
Right.
And so there was a little bit of a challenge because it was new. And so it was a little bit of a challenge to collect those participation fees where the advisor suggested that it's just easier and the kids are used to the structure of
Sure.
paying it,
Yep.
not using fee pay.
That's fine. And so then just go back to trap shooting, an example of a program that we support that is not, that doesn't go through, registration doesn't go through fee pay, and so therefore the money goes directly to the program. It doesn't go, if it's not going through fee pay, how is the district collecting any money off this, or are they not?
So a program like trap shooting is a zero-cost program for us. They're a self-sufficient program, so there is no expense. And because of that, I believe the past practice had been then that there really isn't a participation fee involved. I can definitely get that information as far as participation numbers go for TRAP for you.
Well, I mean, it's more of an example of if we, what programs are we not collecting money through fee pay, but yet we are supporting with your staff time, time at the oversight, staff oversight and things like that, because those do have associated costs, even if it's a, we're not supporting financially the program itself, we are still supporting it in terms of staff content and things, and staff support and things like that.
So I think to try to better answer your question, and I'm not exactly sure that I have the complete answer. My previous school didn't have a TRAP team, and it's kind of a unique structure, I believe, or possibly a common structure. I can get that information for you. We don't pay a coach. We don't pay any fees associated. The only service that we do provide are letters and certificates, but we invoice the TRAP team for those, and then they reimburse the school for the cost of those. So in essence, that is the only cost to the district, and that's covered.
Okay.
And so there's really not a ton of man hours involved with that.
Okay. All right, then that's sufficient. That's been for that. Then my last question would be about what your role is in terms of the booster clubs for both activities and athletics, what your and Jay's role is in supporting those booster clubs. Do they report to you? Like, what is your involvement with the booster clubs?
So since they're a separate entity that supports our athletic and activities, they don't necessarily directly report to me. The coaches sort of serve as a conduit between the athletic and activities department and the boosters, working on increasing communication between the two organizations to make sure that we're kind of on the same page with things and things are streamlined, and that there's just, I'm a firm believer in over-communicating. And so just to make sure that we know kind of, in essence, what the coaches or advisors are asking in support from the boosters, and what the boosters are providing, because they do provide a lot for our students and afford opportunities for our students that the district just, obviously, there's a lot of programs that are pretty expensive, and so it's helpful. So.
Yep. And do you have a set of guidelines or information that you set up with booster clubs that are forming? And do you even know when booster clubs are forming?
I'm aware of when they're forming, but I usually, so I believe we had 2 or 3 booster clubs on the activity side that formed this year. And I sort of pass them and direct them over to Lisa just to make sure that they're in compliance with, I believe, what our district expectations are financially. Because I know that there are policies and protocols in place, so.
Certainly, yes, and she'll keep us on the straight and narrow, and I have no doubt of that. So, then my question more then is about you, because ongoing. So then, yes, Quiz Bowl created a booster club this summer, and so now I don't know if we understand what you're expecting from us in terms of communication, like what information, where's that. What's that information so that we can work in partnership with the district and to really support the kids in the program? And so that's where I'm not sure if that is information that just kind of exists and you get it as you need it, or is there a need for some support that we can create as a district to help support the booster clubs and really make sure that they're active in the way they need to be, and also help giving you the information they need, all in support of the program and the students.
That's a section of that coach's manual that I sort of I'm working on drafting. Again, the coach and the advisor is essentially the conduit between the district and the boosters, and so just the over communication with the advisors and the booster. The advisors and the coaches. When there are booster club meetings, I've been to several of the booster club meetings on the athletic piece because I've received invitations.
Sure.
And so as long as I know that they're happening, I can put it on my schedule and make sure that I'm there to answer questions and be there to support them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I actually do have one. It's more for this board, and so I'm going to look at Director Alt. So through all this conversation, I was jotting down a bunch of notes. They were going to be questions for Guillaume, but I think it's more appropriate maybe for the policy committee to look at a few things. So we have formal activities and we have booster club activities. And so I'd like to I don't want to get into the operations of that, but it seems like we need a policy guiding how those are established, how those are, created. And similar to, I hate to use this analogy, similar to the field trips. What comes to the board, what comes to the principal, what comes to the activity director, because it does seem a little willy-nilly right now. It's not a criticism, we're just formalizing. I also think in this policy, we have to be more clear on fee payments, and if a student isn't able to make them, is that something that the program covers or something that the district covers? Those type of policy-related things, not operational things. Because quite frankly, as a board member, I would want every student to have any opportunity, whether it's a formal activity or club, regardless of their ability to pay. And so I think that is a board policy type situation, not an operational thing. Because, we can't have, some programs have a booster club that can support that student and others that can't, from a consent. So I'm just throwing out from a redirect for the policy committee to maybe look at this a little deeper so we can have a little more formal. Because it's, Guillaume, hopefully you don't feel too peppered. I mean, those are a lot of questions. And,
I'm good.
But that's kind of what I picked up on.
Well, and there is a statement in the handbook that says, that no student will, but it had me a little bit nervous, not so much for the supported activities, but like those clubs that's why those clubs where you can letter are kind of outside of the norm. Mm-hmm. And it sort of says, if there's a student of need, we won't turn them away. We'll find a way to. So there is a statement in the handbook already that says that. But it did worry me because it didn't really identify that those clubs were different than the other sports. So if, some of those were really expensive things like hockey and.
Oh, sure.
And so I wanted to make sure that we're clear about which ones, that we would support as well.
Yeah,
so I'm
right.
glad you brought that up.
Because there's a policy certainly for in fee pay, if you can't pay, then there's scholarship, options available and things like that. But if it's something that's monies that's being collected outside of fee pay, those same procedures might not either be known or in place or more easily, more difficult to implement.
And if it falls under the district umbrella, there should be a policy to kind of guide that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will work with Superintendent Amoroso and bring it back to the
Wonderful.
policy committee.
Thank
so we
you.
can come up with.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we do have the motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with the fall season.
Starts Monday.
Yeah. Next on our agenda is to approve the 2018-2019 ECSE Handbook. Presenting tonight will be Stephanie White, our Director of Student Support Services.
Good evening, Chair Schmidt, Board of Directors. Good evening, Superintendent Amoroso. I'm happy here tonight to present the ECSE Handbook. I have behind me in our gallery our supervisor, Jackie Smith, who's here and represents the great work of our early childhood special education team. The handbook tonight has some changes from last year, and I would like to point those out. Our cover letter changed pretty significantly. We got feedback and thought through how we could make our opening letter more welcoming and really represent the great work that our staff does with our students and families. And so we revised that to make sure that all of our families could read and hear in our letter that we are here to meet them halfway and be a great team member with them. The other things that we changed in the handbook are on the 4th and 5th page, and they're exciting transitions. One is the community-based services. Last year's handbook talked about 2 schools being voluntary pre-K, and we're happy to say that we have 8 opportunities this year to have voluntary pre-K as options to offer our families. And then also in the general information, our transition to kindergarten. We've made some changes in our procedure there to make sure that all of our students are communicated and families are communicated first from their elementary school, because they are general education students first, and that we are the second line of communication. And so we changed our procedure there to make sure that we are aligning our supports during that transition. Of course, if students have specific needs, we're meeting on an individual basis to make sure those teams have that information.
Wonderful, thank you. So the recommendation is that the school board approve the 2018-2019 ECSE Program Parent Handbook. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Director Schatz.
Second.
Second by Director Courier. Any questions or discussions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. We'll keep Stephanie up there. Next on our agenda is to approve the 2018-2019 BEST Handbook.
Thank you. I am equally happy to present the BEST Transition Handbook. I also, in our audience, have a new member of the BEST staff. It's another one of our supervisors, Jennifer Middendorf. She last year was a supervisor at the high school, and this year is also supervising our BEST program and our BOZ program. So she will have that secondary perspective and help us to make sure we're providing services in an equitable manner on all of our sites. The BEST Handbook had some significant changes last year, and as we reviewed it, we felt it reflected what we wanted to communicate other than that front letter. And so Jennifer reworded that front letter to reflect her leadership and her excitement in joining that program.
Well, thank you. I'll read the motion. That the school board approve the 2018-2019 student handbook for the BEST transition program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Director Courier, second by Director Luth. Any questions or comments? Who wouldn't want to work for the BEST program? That's a good play on words.
That's right.
All right, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Good evening.
Next on our agenda is our annual review and approval of the ice arena with the City of Burnsville for the 2018-19 school year. Presenting will be our Executive Director of Business Services, Lisa Ryder.
Good evening. So the ice arena rental is an agreement that we do on an annual basis, and we usually receive this information in the late July, August time period for us to be able to estimate the hours that we will need for boys and girls hockey, both practices as well as games. And so there is before you in the board packet the contract itself. The contract language is very similar to last year's language. The anticipated hours have been used to, as an estimate. And then what we pay is actually based upon the actuals throughout the school year. When I look back, just for context, that information has always usually been very close or less than what we have estimated. So I feel pretty comfortable with what we get on an annual basis for that estimate. The rates per game or hour remain the same as in the prior year. With that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves the Burnsville Ice Arena rental agreement for the 2018-2019 school year in the estimated amount of $89,506 for a total of 405.03 hours of ice time.
Thank you, Lisa. Do I have a first by Director Luth, second by Director Alt? Any discussion or comments? Director Miller.
So just to clarify, we again are paying $2.25 an hour, which is the rate I would pay for an hour if I walked up there and asked for an hour of ice time. Is that not correct?
I believe that as we
It
talked
is,
about
right.
last year, the city does not have different rates.
That's correct. And we are not receiving any concessions for games, for high school games?
Correct.
And we receive half the gate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Director Luth.
Along those lines, as Lisa knows, this is always one of my favorite items every year. And I know I come across like I'm not a hockey fan. I love hockey, by the way, and I support hockey a lot. But as Director Miller just pointed out, there are some, kind of interesting things here in this contract, and he pointed out probably the most glaring items. that just seems interesting when we talk about the partnership between the district and the city. We don't get a better, we don't get a better rate. We're also expected to clean up, and we get charged a cleanup fee after games. And there's some things like that that just for, almost $90,000 just seems a little out of whack to me. But I've said it every year, my last time to say it. So anyway, I'm not asking for a response. I'm just making a statement there. But I do have one item. I thoroughly love the precision that you and your staff bring to this. But when I saw the 405.03 hours, I just had to dive into the spirit of what I've been known for a lot of years, is really digging into the numbers when something looks a little weird to me. And so I was like, wow, 0.03. Okay, that's 1.8 minutes. Is that a practice, a game, whatever? I went through you're looking at it right now. And I went through that, and I discovered that there are some entries that are equal to 1 hour. There's some, hour and a half or whatever. And there's some third of an hour, which you math folks out there, I now understand how the math could come out to 0.03 because we do have some 0.33 items out there. So found that interesting. So I thank you for your continued absolute precision down to the second decimal on that. But I will support this again, but I'm a little bit like Director Miller, and I'm happy to pass that baton to you. And I know you are an unavowed huge hockey proponent with your family and so on. But it just always kind of surprises me on this one, how this plays out for the district. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Luth. Any other questions or comments?
Dr. Who?
Director Luth?
Oh, I thought it was, okay.
Maybe I
Get
slurred
those
my
hearing
words.
aids.
Yeah, I share the same concern. I don't know how the hockey club or the booster club raises funds when they're unable to do concessions. I don't know why we have to pay half the gate, those type of concerns. But, we're kind of put in this position, and I too support it. I just wish we had a different dialogue. This has been the same for the 8 years I've been here as well. With that, we have the motion on the table. Well, no, we don't. I will read it. The recommendation, no, we must have. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, we did, because we had the comments. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll keep Lisa up there. We're going to receive a report and then approval to authorize contracts for solar arrays expansion on 4 of our buildings.
So although the legislative session did not result in many bills that were directly related to schools in general, however, there was a law passed that did allow for an expansion of the solar rewards program. So if you recall, when we did our solar arrays on our buildings this past fall, winter, we, at that point in time, had 2 programs running, Made in Minnesota and Solar Rewards. The Solar Rewards were only a 20 kilowatt array that could be put up on the top of the roofs, and the legislation that has been passed, which was strongly supported and pushed by Ideal Energies, which is the company we worked with, so they've been behind a lot of that push. That has expanded the program now to allow for 40 kilowatts to be atop of the same building for the Solar Rewards program, which gives us the opportunity to expand on 4 of our buildings and explore the opportunity to make the 20 we have up there along with the 40 that we have for Made in Minnesota and increase that by 20 more kilowatts through the Solar Rewards program. So what you have before you is kind of a comparison of what was the original agreement, how does it compare to what's being offered now with the 2018 agreement, and the report to the board indicates some of those differences that exist. There are additional costs that have been incurred now in this industry. There's a reduced energy production. There are certain things that are being done in the agreement that are intended to cover the costs that have been increased. The costs have increased by 30% for the panels as a result of some of the requirements and tariffs. So you will see that the new agreements will reduce energy production from 1,200 kilowatts down to the 1175, that we would be reducing our utility escalation from 5% to 4.5%, reducing the energy savings from 25 to 20%, And the extended put and call term, that's 1 year, would be from 12 years out to 13 years out. And the reduction in estimated call would be from $8,100 down to $5,000. So those are just some of the key things that when you compare it to the previous year's agreements, that would be shifting as a result of the changed legislation. So what is before the board is essentially the question of whether or not we want to expand on these 4 buildings that are listed. They are the Burnsville High School, Marion W. Savage, Sutro Elementary, and the Cedar Alternative School. Again, we'd run through the whole process all over again of structural integrity and whether we can support the additional weight of the additional 20-watt raise. And so those things will all take place similar to what we had seen done in the past. It's just now at this point we are looking for board approval for us to move forward with this and to, if I might read the recommendation, that the Board of Education authorize the Executive Director of Business Services to execute the contracts related to the expansion of Solar Rewards 20 kilowatt solar arrays for Burnsville High School, Marion Savage Elementary, Sutro Elementary, and Cedar Alternative School as they are determined eligible.
Thank you, Lisa. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director Miller, second by Director Schatz. Any questions or discussion?
I do have a question.
Director Schatz.
So if we can't put additional solar panels on those 4 schools, what's the next step after that?
So similar to what happened before is an application has been made on our behalf to just get a toe in the door kind of thing. And so those 4 schools have already been the applications out there. Now it's up to the board to decide whether we want to move forward with it. If so, then we will move forward with, are we accepted for us to move forward with the funds being made available to us? And if so, then we begin that process of whether or not, can this building hold the extra weight and all of the engineering piece that goes with it. If anywhere along the line there's a reason why that project doesn't work, it just won't happen. We won't add anything to it, and those that we can, we would.
So we're limited to those 4 schools?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
that's
it's only,
probably a better way to
the law was strictly just for those that already had the 20 kilowatt,
Okay.
and so that's a closed group before we began that process with the legislation the way it was written. So we're within that closed group. Now the question is, do we want to continue with our process?
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Director Alt.
Thank you, Lisa. Could you please provide an update on the curriculum writing that's associated with this and where we stand looking forward?
Well, every school district wants the curriculum that they are utilizing within the school to be of the quality and the standard that is required for state requirements as well as what we endeavor. So with that having been said, there is a process typically that a district will have for review of curriculum, and fortunately for us, the review of science is coming up in this coming year. So we anticipate that the work that is already in process by Ideal Energies for them to craft and generate some curriculum related to whether it's like after school programs or smaller segments, we have already met with them, with the staff involved in writing the curriculum that they're doing. We've shared with them everything that's out there in the curriculum guide at the state level. They know the standards, they understand what those include, and they have been working to try and identify where does this best fit within those standards, and then they're working on developing those pieces. So our challenge then will be to review that information that they develop and then determine how and where we feel it would best fit within our programming.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Director Vandenboom.
Yeah, on your recommendation letter that talks about identical to the 2017 with the following adjustments, and there's a list of 5 things.
Yep.
I don't necessarily understand all the terms, but it looks to me, so it says there's a reduced energy savings from 25 to 20%. That doesn't sound like a good thing. Is that and then the last one that says reduction in estimated call from 8,100 to 5013. I'm trying to understand if those things are positive things or negative things, because it's not always clear when you're just reading the language.
It is less of a benefit financially to the district. It's still not a full-out cost to us. We are still saving dollars with regard to the energy that we are saving, and we are still able to benefit from the fact that we have the arrays above us on our buildings. I think we went back and we took a look at what has been the production of our solar arrays so far. So keep in mind that some of our arrays went up in February, some in January on our buildings, and so during the winter months it's interesting, but actually take a look at a rainy day and you can see on the website how you don't get much. But on the days where it's sunny, we are getting the amount of energy that they told us we would, so we're seeing that type of energy created. So I would agree that the 18 version compared to 17 is less beneficial. But at this time, I also want to remind us that we didn't go into this as a budget savings so much as we went into it as an opportunity for us to be able to do something green, benefit from it financially to a degree, and yet at the same time also open up the opportunity for our students to be able to participate and get more involved in what solar energy has to offer.
Sure. Well, all of which is true if we don't approve this tonight, right? So,
Yep.
So part of the reason I say that is, so let's just say, as an example, we approve this tonight, and then for whatever reason, those 4 buildings can't accept any additional solar panels.
Right.
We've essentially just reduced so all of these things now become true. We've added a year to their put-call term. We've reduced our savings that they've committed to.
But we won't be signing, this is for the 4 additional. The agreement from 17 still holds true for everything we have on our current buildings.
Say no more.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? I actually kind of had one related to Director Alt on the operations side. So it sounds like we kind of started these up, not all at the same time, so it's always going to be so hard to get the report, but, they gave us, and it's part of the attachments to, this prediction for the next 25 years. So I'd like to see how we're matching up to that. I'd even like to see I realize we haven't even done a year. I'd like to see where we're at, today, at some point. So it's just an ask, it's not related to the approval of this, but.
So we are currently working on obtaining some information directly from Ideal Energies because if we had another person to be able to really dig in and learn how to run the software and then how to compare and contrast it, who had that solar knowledge, we'd have that report generated internally, but we really just don't have that capacity at this point in time. So Glenn has asked for Ideal Energies to generate that for us. So show us how we're doing right now and how this really kind of looks and compares. And so I will follow up and see exactly how we can kind of present that and give that access to you. And then additionally know that we do have access to the website to be able to do this. We're still trying to learn how to really understand it well, and so that's something that as time goes we'll learn more, and certainly as we have more curriculum written and such that we can actually utilize, that will certainly augment our understanding.
Yeah, thank you, because, personally I'm part of a solar farm, and every month I get exactly what it produced and how much savings I'm getting. Last month I got $150-some in savings.
Right.
So it should be available. And so
it is available.
Yeah, all right.
I guess I thought that we had already provided that, but I'm going to follow up and see. Maybe I didn't send that and attach it, or I'm not sure.
Okay,
But let me
I
check on
appreciate that. All right, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Lisa will stick with you. Next on our agenda is approve contracts with Inver Hills Community College for post-secondary enrollment, also known as PSEO, services for the 2018-2019 school year.
All right, so again, for Normandale Community College, we had a 3-year agreement last year. Inver Hills at the time, though, chose to do an annual one. So that's why you're seeing this one come back just for Inver Hills at this time. And so attached, you will find that there are 2 agreements, one of which is, they have specific purposes. So one of them is entirely for the PSEO program, and then the other is for what they call a PSEO course by contract. And so similarly, we had these same ones last year. The rates have not changed. 2 agreements are attached. The agreements will continue to require us to pay the invoices directly, and then the revenue that is received only comes to us and not to Inver Hills. So this is the PSEO by contract that we're doing, where I should say an income contract exists. There's always the traditional method where we can involve MDE, and they instead will process the payments directly to the community colleges, and then they give us a piece back, but it's not as great. We are not claiming the students during that period of time under a traditional role. Here we claim the students 100%, we receive the full amount of aid, and we pay this rate per course. It has proven in the districts that have got jumped on board to this type of a contract to be very beneficial for the districts across the board, and more are doing so. I still believe that this is the best way for us to go. Therefore, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approve the income contracts with the state of Minnesota, acting through its Board of Trustees of the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities on behalf of Inver Hills Community College for PSEO for the 2018-2019 school year.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director Schatz, second by Director Miller. Any questions or comments? I actually just have one. Is there any reason why we can't get them into the 3-year cycle? It's just a lot of extra paperwork and stuff on both ends. It doesn't make sense why everyone want all this paperwork.
I'll make a note to follow up with them.
All right, thanks. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying yes, or aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, signify by saying nay. And the motion carries. All right. Next, we move on to adopt a resolution ratifying and approving our ties reorganization and definitive agreements. Lisa will continue to present there.
All right, we're coming down to wrapping this thing up. What has taken place is there was conversations around dissolution of ties, and what they came to realize, and others can step in if they feel I've misstepped somewhere, but what they've come to realize is that they really can't dissolve ties completely so long as the building is in existence still under their name. And therefore, what you see before you is actually the resolution that they're asking every single member of ties to have their board approve. And this resolution is a requirement of the offer from Sourcewell, and it needs board action in order for them to be able to close on the full agreement September 1st. So the difference is that this is a reorganization. Ties will be renamed instead to be Sourcewell Technology, I believe is what it was. And so there was some discussion around this agreement when it first came out. They had a couple of phone conference calls with all members being able to dial in. And during that period of time, we reached out and sought legal advice as well, just to make sure we were kind of, what other questions are we missing here as you look at this? And so we had that going into those meetings, and we had a list of our own questions we sent off. We got responses in writing, as well as also addressing some of them on the phone call itself. So it was helpful to have that dialogue across all the districts, and I do believe initially there was some vagueness around the whole building, the initial building maintenance fee that we had talked about previously before you, and so that has been firmed up, and you'll see that the amendment that has been made to it includes and defines it as a $3 amount per student. What we did learn is that that is going to cover anywhere between 12 and 18 months of anticipated expenditures for the building. There is still a great deal of hopefulness that the building will be sold prior to that being the case. In fact, they have a date here in August in which they have an open period now for those who are looking at the building to be able to make offers. And only once that date passes, then will all the offers be considered. And then from there, the next steps will be taken. So it's not like nothing's happened yet. How can we think that anything's going to come about? It really has been a process that's designed to right now wait until all offers are available to us, or to them, excuse me. So one thing that is slightly changing is that they have two things happening. As this changes names, the ownership also changes. So we will no longer, as a member, be a governing member of the new organization. Rather, the current executive committee becomes the building committee, and they will make the decisions related to the building on our behalf. The governing members of the new organization, Sourcewell Technology, will be Sourcewell itself, as well as and I'm going to get this wrong, it's the Metro Exu. Yep. So the Metro Exu. So Metro Exu and Sourcewell Technology will now be the governing members, and we become instead members that really we have the opportunity to participate in all of their services. And from that, like E-Rate, we can obtain, because that's still going to be considered a consortium, that we can receive the E-Rate benefits that we currently receive. And so all of that still works for us. And so they're functioning as a joint powers organization still, but we are not a governing member, and therefore we are not necessarily held to any financial commitments in the future aside from the building. So with that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education adopts a resolution ratifying and approving the TIE's reorganization and definitive agreements.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director Schatz.
Second?
Second by Director Alt. Any questions or discussion? Go ahead, Director Vanden.
Well, I'm still, the maintenance fees, is it still open-ended? In other words, as long as they own that building,
Mm-hmm.
We're subject to, now the first one was 3%. Right?
It's $3 per student.
Per student.
Yes.
Per student. So
And
if they own it a year from now, are they going to come back for another $3 per student, and a year after another $3 per student, and so forth?
there is a clause that does allow for the building committee to take to the governing members the discussion, and then for them to explain to us what and why there would be an increase or I should say an additional payment being requested from us. It is true that we are still held to, if the building is not sold within the period of time in which the $3 per student lasts, that we would then be still responsible for the maintenance of that building.
And it was very ambiguous, so it could be $6, it could be... Oh, sorry, thank you. It could be $10, it could be, per student. I mean, so the contract really doesn't lay out anything past that first year at all.
I got the sense, it's a sense, that the belief that they have is that it really won't be important, that it will be sold before then. I know that's hopeful, I know it's very optimistic, but that was the sense I got.
Yep, there's a lot of that in this contract. There's also, they use the word proceeds, so in the event that the building moves not in a positive way, but in a negative way, and it costs money, is there another potential cost to the district to pay to get rid of the building?
It is still our responsibility to pay off the debt related to that building.
Our portion of the debt.
Our portion of the debt, thank you.
Open checkbooks. Okay.
I was going to state, they wanted it more open with this agreement. We were fortunate to have our powers of attorney agreement in there, which capped it at $3. And there wasn't the time actually even to convene a meeting for us to consider an open thing, so they went with actually what we had previously agreed to. And it would be a whole nother discussion if they came back with something at $10 as soon as, this board would have to, seriously consider what would have to happen at that point. I don't see it happening. I'm not in the hope thing of that it'll sell or not, but I don't see, the board, continue to entertain, ongoing, fees like this.
But the contract, and when I read the contract, it alludes to, we don't have a board action year two. It essentially says that.
That is accurate.
Yeah.
There is no board action after this, right? We're basically saying, year 2 and 3, we're opening up.
We're billed.
We are billed for whatever they choose to bill us for. Obviously it has to be a legitimate expense and that sort of thing, but
Right.
But it's a nerve-wracking agreement.
Yeah. Director Alt.
And Director Vandenboom, you're right. It is a nerve-wracking agreement. And just two thoughts. One is big picture. We've now narrowed our liability to just the building, as opposed to the other liability that Sourcewell is and Metro Exu are taking on. So It's the best for where we are right now.
Understand.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, because we had over a $500,000 liability,
That's what I wanted
you
to
know,
ask about.
so.
But originally, when we started talking about this, it was pretty significant. It was operating costs that we were absorbing and things like that. So just to be clear, we are now down to what we've discussed and the
Building.
concerns about it, understandable, but around the building, correct?
Correct.
All right, thanks for that discussion. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Next, we will move on to approval of the proposed revisions and readopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement with the Burnsville Education Association and ISD 191. Presenting will be Stacy Silvine, our Executive Director of Human Resources.
Good evening. Tonight I'm bringing to you proposed revisions on 3 different negotiated agreements. First one is with the teachers union, the second one will be with the educational assistants, and the final one will be with the principals. I'll summarize these fairly quickly and move forward with that. With the teachers, we had 41 different language items that we addressed. We had a 0% increase to the salary schedule value on year 1, a 4% increase on year 2, and the projected cost to the district will be about $6.4 million over 2 years for an MSBA percentage of 5.75%.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Let's see, I'm going to read that formally. Recommendations that the Board of Education approve the proposed revisions and readopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement with the Burnsville Education Association and Independent School District 191. Do I have a motion? So moved by Director Luth, second by Director Alt. Any questions or comments?
On the whole contract?
Well, as it relates to approving this item.
Sure.
All right, Director Vandenboom.
Well, okay, Stacy, on the, why did we go from 1.5 and 2.5 to 0 and 4?
We were, at the time that we reached a tentative agreement, we were coming in close to the end of our fiscal year. My department is currently short-staffed, as well as we had to hire a bunch of summer school staff to cover for summer school. Operationally, it was easier to move the schedule, roll it forward. That was under FY17 or FY18 into FY19 without having to make those changes, just do the step increases and then do the full 4% for the second year. It was operational. It just was ease.
Okay. Is this a defined benefit or a defined contribution medical plan?
It is a defined, well, it is percentage-based, not a flat rate.
But it's still a defined benefit plan. And before, you know, I know we've got 2 more contracts. Are all of our contracts defined benefit versus defined contribution?
Yep.
So larger exposure for the district on financials. Okay. No
Any other questions or comments?
I do have some more comments then. So I have more of a statement that I'd like to make. So here's what I know, and only 1 of every 2 students in our district is currently evaluated as proficient in reading or math. The unpleasant truth is that our student outcomes have been steadily declining for over a decade, with 191 students as a group scoring below the state averages, significantly below our neighboring district averages, and even though below averages of districts with similar socioeconomic demographics. In plain English, we, and I'm talking about the collective we, are not getting the job done. The tentative agreement with the BEA that is before us tonight is financially unsound. The 2-year incremental cost for the teacher agreement alone, setting aside all other staff members' pay increases, is $6.4 million, when all new revenue sources for this district combined for the next 2 years equate to roughly $2.4 million over that same time frame. I did rough numbers based on all of the other settlements that you're proposing tonight and in the past. There's another $1.5 million on top of that for proposed settlements in incremental money that's being spent. The proposed agreement offers few, if any, improvements to or mechanisms to improve accountability or to retain more of our best teachers. Yet the agreement does provide last-in, first-out guarantees of employment along with compensation, step and lane, and the 4% that you refer to increases for teachers as a rule, regardless of performance or behaviors. The new teacher agreement is essentially a continuation of the status quo and, in my opinion, shortchanges both students and taxpayers. It also positions the district poorly going forward and is entirely unsustainable into the foreseeable future. While I firmly believe that student outcomes are everyone's responsibility, the critical point to be made is that our district needs to be laser-focused on improving student academic outcomes now, not later. Our teachers obviously play a crucial role in helping to achieve that goal. Shouldn't a teacher contract that continues to provide increases in salaries and benefits despite ongoing declines in student performance eventually include some meaningful correlation to student outcomes or allow district administration some small amount of discretion to keep more of our best teachers when staff reductions are unavoidable? Apparently not, and certainly not with the contract before us tonight. If we truly cared about improving student outcomes, now is a good time to think and do things differently. Contract issues should have been centered on doing what's best for the students, not on establishing ironclad guarantees of future employment for the adults. After union leaders from the BEA are finished doing their LIFO celebrations, perhaps we can collectively look beyond our good intentions regarding student outcomes and concentrate our energy on actually getting a lot more than 50% of our students proficient in core subject areas like reading and math. In the long run, the best guarantee for future employment will not be based on a contract. It'll be based on true accountability for the work that we were all hired or elected to do in the first place. As a caring board member and passionate advocate for education and student success, I look forward to the day that improving student outcomes moves beyond good intentions and becomes an actionable priority in our district. Improving student outcomes is worth fighting for in the classrooms and in the boardrooms, particularly in our district, and a rinse and repeat contract is not the answer.
Thank you, Director Vandenboom. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd like to just have a short statement as well. So as chairman of the board, I would like to first thank my fellow board members, Dan Luth, Dee Dee Courier, and Darcy Schatz for their tireless service on the negotiations committee. I would also like to thank our district administrators, especially Stacy Sovine and Lisa Ryder, for the countless hours they spent preparing for these sessions. I also want to acknowledge the stress that the prolonged negotiation process caused for many of our students, staff, parents, and community members. While I know that our focus as a board is always on what we believe is best for the students, I also know that this process resulted in missed opportunities that cannot be recovered, challenges for their families, and feelings of mistrust and anxiety among colleagues. I'm deeply saddened that those things happened, and I want to offer my personal apology that they did. While it is the nature of negotiations for two sides to disagree, it is also imperative that we come together as a community to focus on the common goals and priorities. I'm pleased that we were able to come to this agreement, which covers nearly half of the district 191 employees at this time. Having this in place will allow everyone to be focused on the important work ahead. As a district, including all staff members, families, students, community members, and us board members, we can be proud of the progress we've made in the last few years and excited for what's next and for what is to come. When it comes to the contract specifically, we can be proud that we will be able to protect some of the progress we've made through the board, through board staffing priorities. As a district, we don't want to lose an important class. For instance, one of our pathways classes where there might only be one certified teacher. That person is protected regardless of LIFO, and we are happy for that. This will help us to be consistent in what we offer so our students can plan their academic careers with confidence. We can also be proud that the district continues to offer competitive salaries and excellent benefits to our teachers and to all of our staff members who are covered by this contract and the other contracts that have come before us, including nurses, counselors, and school psychologists. We on the board know how important our teachers are to the success of this district, and we look forward to working together to ensure each student is future-ready and community-strong. With that, I'll take a motion, or I will. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. Motion will carry 6-1. Moving on, we'll keep, I think, Stacy up there to approve the proposed revisions and re-adopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, yeah, that's right, with the Burnsville Education Assistance. One key word, assistance. Go ahead, Stacy.
Okay. Again, bringing to you a proposal, looking at a 1.5% increase on year one, 2.5% increase on year two, a 2-year increase cost of about $686,000. The MSBA for the 2-year package was 6.27%. Probably the biggest thing with this unit for that we every year, even though we don't think we're going to have school closures because of the weather, it's kind of weird here in Minnesota, we always end up with one or two. But it really impacts our classified positions that are paid based upon the time in which they're actually working. And so what we were able to do with this group was if they are earning, or if they have great attendance, within 3 days or less, they will accrue an emergency weather day that they can bank up to 3 days that going forward in the upcoming year, they could use that as a reimbursement for a snow day. The only thing it can be used for would be an emergency closure day, and hopefully it will also help us increase our attendance overall because of that incentive. As you know, absenteeism within our staff is high, and this is one way that we're hoping a creative way to address that.
All right, I will read the recommendation that the Board of Education approve the revisions and re-adopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement with the Burnsville Association of Educational Assistants. Do I have a motion? So moved. Moved by Director Courier. Second by Director Schatz. Any discussion or comments?
As has happened with prior contracts, I do have an immediate family member that is a part of this group, and so I will be abstaining as appropriate due to conflict of interest in this vote.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or comments? I actually just had one. That's pretty creative language, Stacy, around the added emergency closure day. I'd be curious. I'll be curious, next year and 2 years from now to see how that works and see if, that can become something bigger if, it does actually decrease absenteeism.
Now that we have the language, we'll probably never have a snow day again, so.
Well, that would be okay. Actually, quite frankly, that'd be okay.
I have 3. Is that what you said, 3?
No, that's good. No, I appreciate that creative, innovative, type of language to try and, solve, a problem that we have. So that's good. All right. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
And the motion carries 6-1. Oh, sorry. 5-1 with 1 abstention. Thank you, even though you said it. All right, last on our agenda tonight is to approve the proposed revisions and re-adopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 master agreement with the Burnsville Principal Association.
Okay. Again, a very simple, straightforward package. It's a 2% increase on the salary schedule with a 2-year increase cost of $209,000. 2-year package is 4.67%. Did a little bit with life insurance. Moved it from $50,000 to $100,000. That matches some administrators or moves closer to administrators in other districts. The downside with that, anything over $50,000 for life insurance now becomes a taxable item. So we're covering minimal, an amount for the additional life coverage, but they will be paying taxes on it. So that's kind of a trade-off there. The other item that we did was our principal schedules are a little bit different in the sense that everybody is working exactly the same amount of time, and yet there's a difference in the amount of pay in which they're receiving. And it's at the point, quite frankly, where we could have APs making more, associate principals making more than our elementary principals coming into the system. So at this point in time, we're adjusting the elementary principals a little bit more if they have a master's degree, so that we're at least creating some clear definition between the different levels. Going forward, when we're still within a contract year, hopefully, we'll be able to start having conversations more around the duty days and how the schedules line up and the actual appropriate tiers. So, but because of where we are in the time, we just moved forward with this at this level.
All right. Thank you. I read the recommendation that the Board of Education approve the proposed revisions and readopt the unchanged language in the 2017 through 2019 master agreement with the Burnsville Principal Association.
So moved.
So moved by Director Alt, second by Director Luth. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
And the motion carries 6-1. Thank you. We are going to move to adjournment. Before we do, I'll just thank everyone for bearing with I think I had 3 blunders. You know, I'm a good example of sleep deprivation. I haven't slept for almost 2 days now because I traveled back from India. And so if you ever want to know what it does, it messes with your mind and you say things that you don't know you're saying. But nonetheless, I appreciate all the work of the board over the summer and glad that we're back in session. We'll be back here in 2 weeks and all of our committees are fired up. With that, I'll take a motion for adjournment. So moved by Director Schatz, second by Director Miller. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.